Former Vice President Dick Cheney joins ATV Special Broadcast. Mr. Vice President, we welcome you to the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You started your career in politics as an intern for a state senate. Then over the years, you rose to the ranks to become White House Chief of Staff, Secretary of Defense, and then Vice President. What do you think made you so successful in climbing the ranks of government?
Well, there was a certain amount of luck involved, obviously. And a lot of good people who helped me along the way. And I started out to be an academic. I wanted to teach, and I came to Washington to work on a dissertation for a PhD. I was a student at the University of Wisconsin, and I wanted to teach political science. I wanted to be a professor. And that was over 40 years ago. I came to stay 12 months, and I stayed a bit longer. But once I got here, I had opportunities to get actually involved in the process, to work on the Hill, and then to work in the White House in the Nixon administration. And as things worked out, partly because of Watergate, for example, in adversity there's opportunity. Watergate led to the resignation of President Nixon. Jerry Ford took over. I ended up working for President Ford as his Chief of Staff. That would never have happened if it hadn't been for Watergate.
So during your time in college, you had a bit of a tough time because you started in Yale, but then because of poor grades, you wound up dropping out. If grades are
kicked out, I think.
Okay, kicked out. If grades are something you struggled with, what other qualities did you focus on or skills did you develop during college to help prepare you for your career?
What happened when I got out of high school, I was recruited to go to Yale. My family didn't have any money. I couldn't afford it, but the local Yale recruiter came to me, and I'd played football and baseball and been president of my class, had respectable grades. And they offered me a financial package to go to Yale, and I said, well, sounds like a good idea. So I signed up and went, and I lasted about 3 semesters. I hadn't really given any thought to why I was there or what I was doing, and it showed in my grades and other matters. The dean used to write home, and I still got a letter someplace where he told my folks I'd fallen in with a very high-spirited group of young men, which was a nice way to say that we weren't tending to business. I went out and built power line and transmission line for a few years, and then I got serious about getting married, and my wife was pretty clear she didn't want to live in a house trailer and boom from job to job. So I went back to school, and it turned out when I worked at it, I was a pretty good student. And one thing led to another, and as I say, I ultimately prospered as a student and got a BA and a master's, and then did all the coursework for a PhD, and that in turn led me to Washington. Well, once I got to Washington, I had an opportunity that I didn't want to turn down.
And while you were in Washington, you had some pretty incredible opportunities to serve in leadership positions.
Right.
What do you think it takes to be an effective leader?
Well, it's you've got to have the ability to look at a situation and have some idea of how you want to respond to it. You need to be calm, cool, and collected in a crisis. That's very important. You want to have the ability to judge people. And you can't do anything by yourself. You end up having to hire people to put around you, whether it's creating a cabinet or running a federal agency, putting together a campaign. It all depends very much on who you can recruit to take on those tasks. People will have to want to go where you want to take them. They need to respect you as a leader and look to you for good, sound judgment. You've got to be loyal to your people too, though. If they, it's a two-way street. You can't just anticipate or require that they be loyal to you. You also have an obligation to be loyal to them. During
your time as Vice President, you had some really tough decisions to make, especially after 9/11. What do you think was the hardest decision to make?
I had to do things such as issue the shoot-down order on an aircraft that had been hijacked over Pennsylvania, was reputed to be headed for Washington, and the request came in to me in the bunker as to whether or not the Air Force was authorized to take it down, and I said yes, and issued that instruction. In the end, before we could get to it, the passengers themselves had taken it down.
So there are some people that suspect that you committed war crimes and they want to have you prosecuted for war crimes because of your advocacy for torture against people that are suspected of terrorism. Like a Malaysian court convicted you of war crimes, a Malaysian tribunal.
A Malaysian tribunal? I missed that one. I didn't know that.
A group last year in Canada tried to have you arrested.
I'm familiar with that one. They wanted to arrest me and ship me off to The Hague.
So when you hear these accusations, what is your reaction?
Well, they're not true. I mean, I was a strong advocate of putting in place effective counterterrorism measures that would let us intercept or foil the next attack. We fully expected after 9/11 that there would be follow-on attacks. And we therefore had to put in place things like the terrorist surveillance program, now called it's referred to as NSA, or the NSA program. We also was a strong advocate and helped put together the enhanced interrogation program. Some people call it torture. It wasn't torture. We were very careful in all respects to abide by the law. We got legal opinions out of the Justice Department with respect to what we could do and what we couldn't do. The Attorney General of the United States had to sign off on each of these programs. The President of the United States had to sign off on them. The National Security Council had to approve them. So this notion that somehow there was torture involved, that's not true. It's a name that a term that the critics have used in order to try to discredit the program. But the fact is, those two programs, as much as anything else, kept us safe for 7.5 years. And the fact that we defeated all follow-on attempts at a major attack on the United States speaks for itself. It worked.
Well, let me just ask you, because the Geneva Conventions, they prohibit cruel and inhumane treatment of detainees. Do you think those rules should be modified as applied to non-state actors like Al-Qaeda?
Well, the Geneva Convention doesn't apply to unlawful combatants. It was put together to govern the treatment of military prisoners, for example, in wartime. But an unlawful combatant is a terrorist, is somebody who is specifically involved in carrying out military acts without following the laws of war. Their targets are civilians. And there are very explicit provisions in terms of the Geneva Convention where that don't apply to unlawful combatants. And at the time, the definition of the Al-Qaeda terrorist killing 3,000 Americans, innocent men, women, and children, on 9/11 was that these were unlawful combatants.
The Obama administration recently announced plans to cut the size of the military. Mm-hmm. You said those cuts would be devastating.
Yes.
However, when you were Secretary of Defense, you also promoted a significant cut in military troops. Why was it appropriate for you to do that then, and you don't think it's okay for Obama to do that now?
Well, we did cut about 25% of our force structure as a result of the end of the Cold War, and which was fully justified strategically, because that requirement of having to go to war against the old Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact went out of business.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you again for coming on the program and sharing some of your insights with us. I appreciate it.
Well, it's nice to be asked.